Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Elliott, Chairman of Advocacy for the UIBC. We're here with our weekly recap of last week. I'm here with John Perry, who is also a co-chair of advocacy, and we just want to bring you updated on last week's happenings.
Thanks, Carol.
First thing, we would like to remind you and invite you to go into our website. If you have any questions that you would like us to answer or find answers for you, so let us know if there's any concerns, questions, or otherwise on our webpage. First thing we want to bring up this week is a change that the legislature wants to make. And even though it is not directly involving local small businesses, in the long run and over a period of time, it certainly does affect local businesses. And this is the legislature wanting to change the law again about how education is funded in the state of Utah. There is a bill that's being introduced that wants to gradually take away the funding of income tax, all income tax going to fund education. So they are looking at changing the way the funding is going to be and want to make it a education fund instead of a constitution requirement that income tax fund education. This is a bill that is just being introduced, and it certainly is one worth watching and seeing how the state of Utah is going to fund education. And one of the caveats that they're trying or pulling into this to make it a little bit more palatable to the Teachers Association and anyone else involved in funding is they're discussing doing away with food tax as kind of an exchange option, I guess, to make people not want to be up in arms and fight the refunding. They want to be able to use the income tax for other services, not just education. So it is a bill that is worth watching what happens, and it's certainly being introduced very late in the session for such a major conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that proposal. The other kind of big, related piece of news regarding the Senate, anyway, within the last week or so, has been the Senate's passing of a new special rule limiting press access to the Senate chamber, halls, lounge, and committee rooms. This was actually something that had quite a bit of local news coverage here. And so we've got a little summary of that in the written report that we're doing that will be available to you either through email, or you can go to our website, utahindependentbusiness.org, and see the details on that. But we here at Utah Independent Business Coalition have some serious concerns about that, and the senators explained some of their reasoning for it. But at least from our perspective, I think we've got concerns anytime that there are restrictions on the press and on media to do their reporting and to provide information to the public just about what issues and what decisions are being decided up on Capitol Hill.
A couple of other bills that we are watching that do affect local small business in some direct ways and some indirect. There is a House Bill number 425 and it is a alcohol bill on allowing grocery stores or breweries to do home deliveries of alcohol. There is a limit of 4 cases. It really will not affect restaurants per se, and breweries to a much lesser. It will affect them less so than giving grocery stores the opportunity to deliver beer. It's not a major change as far as helping small restaurants and local restaurants or breweries, but it is a bill worth being aware of. The other one is SB 176, and it is an omnibus bill with alcohol changes, but the biggest effect that it would have on local restaurants is actively allowing the selling of beer to go, but not to be delivered after people eat at a restaurant. So they can do beer to go to take home with them or wherever after they leave the restaurant. And that one certainly will affect local restaurants.
I imagine maybe that relates to some establishments, especially breweries, having like tap beer that you could take with you in growlers or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see if that passes or not. Another bill that we're watching that has just recently been introduced is Senate Bill 227, which is titled the Consumer Privacy Act. And so, at least from my perspective, I think this is one of the more significant pieces of legislation that's been introduced this session that will possibly directly affect most all of our local independent businesses here in Utah. So we haven't had a chance to read this in great detail yet. It is a pretty lengthy bill, but the basic idea is it would implement a rather comprehensive array of rules and regulations and law related to the protection of consumer privacy of their data. So there have been similar efforts that have passed in a few other states in the country. California is probably has the most notoriety about this. The California Consumer Privacy Act that was passed in 2018 and then followed up by a ballot proposition actually called the California Privacy Rights Act that became effective in 2020. And Colorado, one of our neighbors, actually just passed a similar law just this past year in July of 2021. So we would encourage you, we've got a summary in the written email update and on the website that provides the main details of what this new Utah legislation, the Utah Consumer Privacy Act that's been proposed, what that would entail. So see our written summary on that. But of everything that I've seen this session myself, I think this law, if it would pass, would probably have some of the most impact on all of our local independent businesses, because this would affect things such as just the requirements for business websites and how data that comes into a website from prospective customers or other parties who are trying to interact with your business, how that data would have to be stored, protected, and even how the business would have to respond to requests from third parties and customers to remove that data and what you can actually do with it. So we're going to be looking at this legislation in some detail, and definitely following up on whether it passes or not. I question actually whether there's enough time in the session, because we've got only a little less than 2 full weeks of the legislature left to go. It's going to end on March 4. So I don't know if they're going to have enough time to fully process and consider this, but we'll definitely stay or help you keep updated on that.
So there are a couple of other things that we would like to bring to your attention and discuss. One is the legislature came out with an announcement this week that they had an $800 million surplus. This brings up the subject of taxing PPP money, which is an ongoing conversation, and it is something that we are not giving up on. There was no reason to tax this money, and we are continuing to work on getting this bill rescinded and refunded to those that have paid tax on the PPP money. If the state has got that much of a surplus, they did not need this money. So we want you to be aware of that we're still working on it. And we also want you to be aware that we are planning a legislative wrap up at the end of the session. It'll be towards the end of March or the 1st of April. We will keep you updated on that, but do look forward to a in-person legislative wrap up.
And just the other 2 bills that I would mention, and again, these are all addressed in our written update to everybody. HB 60, which we have mentioned in previous weeks, that's the one that would prohibit private businesses from enforcing vaccine requirements on employees or patrons. It seems like that one is probably on its way to passage. It's received a favorable recommendation in the House committee, and I can't remember exactly which House committee it was before, but it received a favorable recommendation, and now it's moved on to I believe the full House for consideration. So we'll watch for that. And then the other one I was going to mention is another new bill that was just recently filed. It's HB 444. This bill, which is sponsored by Representative Robert Spendlove, would modify the tax obligations of pass-through entities and owners of those pass-through entities. So that covers I don't know if it covers a majority, but it covers a substantial percentage of our Utah businesses who are taxed essentially as pass-through organizations like sole proprietorships or partnerships. This bill would actually allow the entity itself to pay the tax that is ultimately owed by the owners, to allow the entity to actually pay the tax itself. And then there'd be some requirements about the entity having to inform all the members about the tax that's been paid. And I think there's also a provision for the business to actually receive a credit for that business paid. So we've actually got a message into Representative Spendlove asking him to provide a little bit more detail about this bill. And assuming that I'm sure he'll respond, we'll get you updated on that and let you know how that might affect our local independent businesses. So Carol, we're getting near to the end of the session, and would you say it's safe to assume that the fun part is possibly just beginning, based upon our past experience with the Utah legislature?
I definitely would say the fun part is just beginning. the last week is always the most interesting, and the last day is by far the most interesting because there seems to always be surprises and things that popped up that no one has given a thought to. So it will be, we're going into the stretch run and it will be interesting. So stay tuned.
All right, I will get the popcorn ready, and I'm sure we're gonna have some news that neither one of us could imagine possibly in these last couple of weeks. And again, we look forward after the session to engaging with everybody on a good old-fashioned UIBC legislative wrap-up. If you haven't attended one of those events before, been part of that, it is definitely worth it. And we've got one in the works this year that we think will probably be one of our more entertaining ones that we've held so far. So we'll keep you in suspense about that, and we'll keep watch for all of you, all of our members and friends of UIBC until we meet again. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Utah Independent Business Coalition is a collaborative association of Utah's local small businesses. These independently owned enterprises include the small stores, cafes and restaurants, manufacturing, and professional services businesses that are at the heart of our community. Here are just a few businesses that are members of Utah Independent Business Coalition. These independently owned businesses lend a unique flavor and sense of place to our neighborhoods. Utah Independent Business Coalition provides advocacy, education, mentoring, and social connections for small business owners. Together, we're building a stronger, independent business community in Utah.